Welcome back to Vuln Vibes, everybody. Today in our WP Safe block, we're doing a deep dive into a summary of some recent high and critical WordPress vulnerabilities.
Right, but we're going beyond just listing them out.
Yeah.
We've got a whole stack of reports and analyses here,
Yeah,
and we're going to extract the most significant trends for you.
yeah. And we're assuming you're already familiar with the basics of IDT, TNCK, and kill chains and all that good stuff.
Exactly.
So we're going to cut right to the chase and focus on the bigger picture.
Right.
You know, what these vulnerabilities tell us about the current state of WordPress security and what you need to watch out for.
Right.
So let's dive right in. What's the first trend that's jumping out at you from all this data?
Well, one thing that's impossible to ignore is the sheer number of authentication issues that keep cropping up.
Yeah.
It seems like every other vulnerability we're looking at involves some way to bypass authentication or escalate privileges.
Ugh, authentication bypasses. It's like the cybersecurity equivalent of leaving your front door wide open, isn't it? No matter how many other security measures you have in place, if someone can just waltz right in, you're in trouble.
Precisely. And we're seeing this play out in a few different ways.
Okay.
For example, take the Mini Orange social login and register plugin.
Yeah.
Super convenient for users, right?
Oh, yeah.
Log in with your Facebook or Google account. No need to remember another password.
Right.
But the vulnerability here is that it doesn't always properly verify the user information returned by that social login token.
So an attacker could potentially grab a username, slip past the verification process, and boom, they're in, potentially even as an admin.
It's a scary thought, and it highlights the importance of robust validation, even when dealing with trusted third-party services.
Okay, so social logins, definitely something to keep an eye on. What other authentication issues are we seeing?
Another interesting example is the Java Core plugin.
Okay.
This one's a bit more straightforward, but no less concerning.
Okay.
It essentially lets users choose their own role during registration.
Wait, so anyone could just sign up as an administrator? That seems like a pretty glaring oversight.
You'd think so, right? But it goes to show that even seemingly basic features can have major security implications if they're not implemented carefully.
Yeah.
And this isn't just about sloppy coding, it speaks to a broader trend of insufficient attention to privilege escalation vulnerabilities.
So the takeaway here is that authentication bypasses are still a major weak point in the WordPress ecosystem. And we as security professionals need to be extra vigilant about ensuring that proper authentication and authorization checks are in place.
Absolutely. We can't just assume that plugins or themes have taken care of this for us. We need to be proactive about auditing and verifying these critical security controls.
Okay, so authentication issues are a big one. What else is on your radar?
Well, another recurring theme that's hard to miss is the prevalence of file upload vulnerabilities.
Oh, yeah.
It's like the gift that keeps on giving for attackers.
Yeah, we've got a whole stack of reports here about those. Let's start with the product input fields for WooCommerce plugin. What's the issue there?
The core problem is insufficient file type validation.
Okay.
Basically, the plugin doesn't do a good enough job of checking what kind of file is being uploaded.
Right.
So an attacker could potentially upload something malicious disguised as a harmless image or document.
And that could lead to that dreaded remote code execution scenario, right? Where
Yeah.
the attacker essentially gains control of the server.
Exactly, and it's not just a theoretical possibility. We see this type of vulnerability being exploited in the real world all the time.
What other plugins are struggling with similar file upload issues?
We've got Aomatic, the AI content writer plugin,
Uh-huh.
and SMTP by Best Websoft, the email plugin.
Okay.
Both have vulnerabilities related to arbitrary file uploads.
Got it.
It's a reminder that these issues can crop up in all sorts of plugins regardless of their popularity or intended function.
So even if a plugin has a ton of downloads and positive reviews, it doesn't necessarily mean it's secure.
That's right, we can't just rely on reputation or popularity.
Right.
We need to scrutinize the code and understand the potential attack vectors.
So file upload vulnerabilities are another big trend. Anything else standing out to you?
Let's talk about how exploitation opportunities can vary depending on the level of access an attacker has.
Okay, so this isn't just about admin accounts being compromised.
Right.
We need to be thinking about vulnerabilities that can be exploited at different levels.
Exactly. A vulnerability that might seem minor if an attacker only has low-level access could be devastating in the hands of someone with higher privileges.
Right.
And we're seeing examples of this across a range of plugins.
Give me an example. What kind of plugin are we talking about here?
Take the Vikrant Car plugin, for instance.
Okay.
It has a vulnerability related to cross-site request forgery, or CSRF.
Okay, so that's where an attacker tricks someone into performing an action on a website without their knowledge, right?
Right. And in this case, if an admin falls for the trick and clicks a malicious link, the attacker could potentially upload arbitrary files even though they themselves don't have admin access.
Ah. So even if the vulnerability itself doesn't grant admin privileges, it can still be leveraged to gain control if the right user is tricked into taking a specific action.
That's one scenario. And then you have cases like the Iomatic plugin again.
Yeah.
Remember, it's file upload vulnerability.
The one that could lead to remote code execution.
Well, that particular vulnerability can be exploited by an attacker with just contributor-level access.
Wow.
They don't need to be an admin at all to potentially wreak havoc.
That's a bit unsettling.
Yeah.
So even users with relatively limited privileges can potentially compromise the site if they exploit the right vulnerability.
It highlights the importance of a defense-in-depth approach where we're not just focusing on protecting admin accounts, but also thinking about security at all levels of user access.
That makes sense. Any other examples of vulnerabilities that can be exploited at different privilege levels?
Yeah, the Post-Meta Data Manager plugin is another interesting case. This one does require admin access to exploit,
Okay.
but it allows for privilege escalation on multi-site installations.
So an attacker could use this vulnerability to gain control of subsites they shouldn't have access to,
Right.
even if they start with admin privileges only on the main site.
Precisely. It underscores the point that even when admin access is required, the implications can extend beyond just that one account, especially in multi-site environments.
Yeah, it's like a chain reaction.
Right.
Okay, so we've got authentication bypasses, file upload vulnerabilities, and exploitation opportunities that span different privilege levels. What else is jumping out at you from this mountain of data?
You know, it's interesting. We often get caught up in the complexity of sophisticated exploits.
Yeah.
But sometimes the most significant vulnerabilities stem from simple misconfigurations or fundamental design flaws. It's a good reminder that security isn't always about finding obscure bugs in the code. It's about ensuring that basic security principles are followed from the ground up.
I'm intrigued. Give me an example. What kind of simple misconfiguration are we talking about here?
The Allow PHP Execute plugin is a perfect case in point. As the name suggests, it allows users to embed PHP code directly into posts and pages.
Hold on, allowing users to embed PHP code directly? That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
What are the potential consequences of that kind of setup?
Well, allowing unfiltered HTML input is like opening a Pandora's box of security risks. A malicious actor could inject PHP code that allows them to hijack the site, steal sensitive data, or deface the content.
So it's not necessarily about some complex exploit targeting a specific vulnerability in the plugin itself.
Right.
It's about the plugin's core functionality, creating a wide open door for anyone with malicious intent.
Exactly. And this highlights a critical point that often gets overlooked. Security isn't just about the code itself, it's about how that code is implemented, configured, and ultimately used.
A holistic challenge. You can have the most secure code in the world, but if it's configured in a way that undermines those security measures, or if users are engaging in risky practices, you're still vulnerable.
Absolutely. And speaking of layers, let's not forget about database security. It might seem like old news in a world of fancy exploits, but it's still absolutely essential.
Yeah, at the end of the day, a lot of these vulnerabilities we've been discussing ultimately aim to gain access to that precious data stored in the database.
Right, and we're still seeing classic vulnerabilities like SQL injection pop up time and time again. Take the WP Recall plugin, for example. It has a known SQL injection flaw.
SQL injection, it's been around forever, but it still works, doesn't it?
Unfortunately, yes. It's one of the most prevalent and potent web application vulnerabilities.
Right.
In this case, it allows attackers to extract sensitive data from the WordPress database.
Right.
It's a stark reminder that even in 2023, with all the advanced attacks we see, basic database security hygiene is non-negotiable.
So even in this world of zero-day exploits and AI-powered attacks, we can't afford to neglect the fundamentals, sanitizing inputs using parameterized queries and keeping your database software patched are still absolutely critical.
Absolutely. It's like locking your front door. It might seem basic, but it's one of the most effective safeguards against a wide range of threats.
So we've talked about authentication issues, file upload vulnerabilities, exploitation across privilege levels, the impact of misconfigurations, and the enduring importance of database security. What's the overarching takeaway here? What do all these trends tell us about the current state of WordPress security?
I think the key takeaway is that vigilance is paramount. We can't afford to be complacent, especially when WordPress powers such a huge portion of the web.
Yeah.
We need to stay informed, proactively address known vulnerabilities, and always be thinking about security from multiple angles.
It can feel overwhelming to keep up with all the latest threats,
Yeah.
but that's why we do these deep dives, right? To cut through the noise, synthesize the information, and equip you with the knowledge you need to stay ahead of the curve.
Exactly. Knowledge is power, especially in the world of cybersecurity.
So as you go about your work this week, think about these trends. Think about how they might apply to your sites, your client sites, or any WordPress site you encounter.
Don't just think about it, take action. Review your security practices, harden configurations, update your plugins, and stay vigilant.
Security is an ongoing journey, not a destination, and we're all in this together.
Absolutely. We learn from each other, share our insights, and collectively raise the bar for WordPress security.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive. Thank you for sharing your expertise and helping us make sense of these trends. And that brings us to the end of another Vuln Vibes deep dive into the world of WordPress vulnerabilities.
But remember, this is just a snapshot in time.
Right.
The threat landscape is constantly evolving, so staying ahead of the curve is an ongoing challenge. New vulnerabilities are discovered every day, and attack techniques are constantly evolving.
It can feel like a never-ending race.
Yeah.
But that's why we do these deep dives, right? To help you cut through the noise, understand the key trends, and empower you to take action.
Exactly. By focusing on the bigger picture, we can start to anticipate the types of attacks that are most likely to occur and build more resilient systems.
So as you continue your work in the world of WordPress security, keep these trends in mind. What can our listeners do to apply these insights to their own work?
Well, first and foremost, don't underestimate the basics. Strong passwords, regular updates, and secure configurations are the foundation of a secure WordPress site.
It's like building a house. You need a solid foundation before you can start worrying about the fancy decorations.
Precisely. And don't be afraid to dig into the code. Understanding how plugins and themes work and where their potential weaknesses lie is essential for proactive security.
And remember, security isn't a one-time fix. It's an ongoing process.
Absolutely. It's a journey of continuous learning, adaptation, and improvement. The more we understand the threats, the better equipped we are to defend against them.
Thanks for joining us on this Vuln Vibes deep dive. We hope you found it insightful and empowering. And remember, we're all in this together. By sharing knowledge and working collaboratively, we can make the WordPress ecosystem a safer place for everyone. Until next time, stay vigilant and keep those WordPress sites secure.